It's time to put your health in your own hands. Get ready to learn from today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, EILEEN MEAGHER. She is a gifted energy healer who connects people and animals with life force in nature to advance their health and well-being, to prevent illness, help eliminate existing problems, and heal systemic toxicity. After meeting Guruji Mahendra Trivedi and joining his Healer's Mastery Program, EILEEN truly discovered and developed her gifts. Her healing abilities have been scientifically validated using cell-based and mouse models on overall health, quality of life, skin health, and vitamin D3 absorption. Today, she supports individuals in transforming the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of their lives. She is passionate about utilizing holistic healing for leading people out of suffering and into fulfillment. EILEEN believes immensely that she is blessed, and she wants to serve the source of creation in advancing the health and well-being of the entire world. Welcome, EILEEN.
Thank you, Tammy. Hello, how are you?
Good. I just wanted to tell everyone about today's topic a little bit, and it is chronic fatigue. EILEEN and I actually were talking about this before we went on the air, and I actually did suffer from chronic fatigue. They actually can run blood tests and tell you if you have it because your body creates these antibodies. And the best way to describe chronic fatigue, obviously, is feeling tired, feeling worn out. For me, I literally felt like I was a wind-up doll, and that I was be wound up in the morning, and a couple hours later, I could hardly walk across the room. It got that bad where, I could hardly function. And again, the doctors, how they treated me was with some type of an antibiotic, but by the time they figured it out, I already had fought off most of this virus myself, and then I had vitamin B12 shots. So I'm really interested, EILEEN, in knowing more about chronic fatigue and maybe some alternative ways that people can deal with it. So go ahead and tell me more about chronic fatigue, EILEEN.
Well, chronic fatigue is really pervasive in our society, and it is quite misunderstood. All of us experience what we call a normal kind of fatigue. We've missed a night's sleep, or we experience jet lag, or whatever. But chronic fatigue is something very different. It is really a disease. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Something about the numbers first, which are very interesting, that the Centers for Disease Control reports that 76% of the workforce is tired most days of the week. Well, that's pretty significant. And 45% of Americans wake up feeling tired or fatigued up to 3 to 4 times a week. And we have another report from YouGov.poll, which reveals that only 1 in 7 Americans wakes up feeling fresh every day. We also have learned that the greatest fatigue is felt by people ages 45 to 64, and that women are 4 times more likely to experience this severe form of fatigue than are men. As you can imagine, this really hinders productivity in the workforce. It also is a great cost in individuals' lives because most of the time they miss many days at work. So the cost to the economy is an unbelievable $24 billion a year. That's the general estimate. And about chronic fatigue as opposed to regular fatigue, there are many causes that are ascribed to it, but really those causes are not causes, they are symptoms. And what I found out in my research, that the symptoms are usually great stress, anxiety disorders, lack of sleep, chronic inflammation, a lot of grief and regret, unusual grief and regret, persistent pain, especially in the joints, a habit of consuming alcohol and drugs, and sometimes excessive physical activity or too little physical activity. These are all symptoms, and a lot of other symptoms or a lot of other diseases have been confused with this chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of them is, as you mentioned, Tammy, Epstein-Barr syndrome, that particular virus. The problem with this whole business of chronic fatigue syndrome is that it is not covered in medical school. It's not given really serious attention by primary care doctors. And when they hear the symptoms, they tend to prescribe perhaps some drugs to ease those symptoms. They also prescribe Epsom salts, a lot of rest. They will say rest some, then work some, then rest some more, work some. Don't do any too much, don't do either too much. And they suggest acupuncture as well as alternative remedies, because what they're finding out is that what they prescribe is not really getting to the root of this particular syndrome. Some of the alternative modalities they suggest are yoga and Tai Chi and Reiki. And of course, we found out, as with the conventional remedies, that these alternative remedies do not provide any lasting relief. And often the side effects of the symptoms are the symptoms are the side effects of the disease, and the side effects of the symptoms would be more depression and anxiety on the part of the individual or the patient. So what we've come to understand more recently, as a result of science that has been done in the last few years, the science has been commissioned by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and also the Institute of Medicine. And they have determined in their more recent studies and lab work that the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome is not at all psychological in nature, as many doctors and many people tend to think. Rather, it is definitely biological in nature. And it is a disease which starts in the immune system, then causes a brain dysfunction that at first shows up as an infection with flu-like symptoms and or something serious like Epstein-Barr. So it's there's been a turnaround in the medical field. They're realizing this is something that's genuinely biological in nature, and it is not a pathological, psychological condition. The infection that causes this can be due to trauma or stress, or it can be due to genetics or environmental stresses. But people, doctors, scientists don't really know. But what is helpful is that they're really working hard to try to get to the cause of this biological disease, and it is a biological disease. And they've changed the name now from chronic fatigue syndrome, or what they've really been calling it is myalgic, a kind of myalgic disease, chronic fatigue syndrome. They've changed it to the acronym SEID, which stands for an infection, an exertion infection disease. a symptomatic exertion infection disease. So now chronic fatigue syndrome in the medical literature is referred to as SEID. And people will be glad to hear who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome that much more focused attention is being paid to this disease. And there's a lot of research going on it. In fact, in my own research on this problem, I found out that there have been many complaints, continue to be many complaints by people who suffer from the disease that the doctors, that the medical community has not been taking it seriously, has not been paying the careful attention to it that they should have been paying. What's been interesting is that as a result of what the NIH and the IOM, the Institute of Medicine, have been discovering in the last few years, they have started offering free online courses to doctors so that they can be more informed about chronic fatigue syndrome, informing them that it is indeed biological in nature and not a pathological psychological problem, and alerting them to what are the many times the symptoms of this, and that something like Epstein-Barr and other conditions are really symptoms of this underlying biological problem rather than being diseases in and of themselves. They are byproducts of this. And many times people who suffer from this particular disease, they spend days in bed. And then for a few days, they seem to be fine. They get up and they seem to be just fine. And then they get floored again, another few days in bed. So the loss in their lives to productivity and happiness and wellness is very serious and very severe. And of course, the loss to their productivity in the workplace is huge. As I mentioned, about $24 billion a year. But there is hope. And the hope is, and I would urge people who are suffering from chronic fatigue, or what appears to be chronic fatigue, not to despair, that the doctors are really working at this now. Science is really working at it to discover what's the actual nature of this biological problem and how to treat it. Of course, it may be a while before that happens, but at least those who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome can know now for sure that it's not in their heads, that they're not crazy, that there is something real going on, and it's at the biological level. So I would say, I would urge people perhaps to start looking at the Trivedi Effect to see if that can help them. The Trivedi Effect, of course, is a breakthrough science that is able to get to the cellular level of any problem, any disease in humans. And the Trivedi Effect has been tested and tested and tested over 4,000 times and been shown to really be able to correct things at the cellular level. So I would urge people to get as much of this energy, life force energy, that is provided by the Trivedi Effect to help get to the root of this problem, this biological problem, because modern science at the moment is not able to prescribe something that would get to the root. They are trying hard to, but they haven't succeeded as yet. In the meantime, I would urge people to try the Trivedi Effect, and they can simply go to www.trivedieffect.com/science, and they can learn a lot about the Trivedi Effect and how it works and how it has been able to help so many people with so many problems that regular medicine could not help them with.
That's really fascinating, Eileen, and thank you so much for giving us this update Because when I had my diagnosis of Epstein-Barr virus, it was probably in 2000 or so, so almost 20 years ago. And I think at that time, like I said, all I remember is, the wind-up doll, and I was just exhausted. And in order to keep working, my doctor at the time gave me some type of antibiotics, and then I had to go in early before work, like 3 times a week, for this massive vitamin B12 shot. And
Yes.
yes, the vitamin B12 was how I was able to keep working, because I did not miss any work during this time. And at the time I had 3 children, young children, at home, ranging from probably about 6 or 7 years old up to teenager at the time. So, and I was working full time. So believe me, I really know how devastating any type of fatigue can be, in just your daily lives. And it's good to hear that the science and that doctors are actually, trying to find better ways, and that it's a biological problem. I always knew that it wasn't, it was not a mental issue, because
Yes.
Definitely in my case, they literally did a blood test and said, yes, your body has been fighting off Epstein-Barr virus, which I guess is some form of like mono.
Right.
But it's interesting how many diseases or symptoms get lumped into different phrasing, and I was not aware that they had actually changed the name of it to the SEID, whatever. I didn't get the complete acronym.
System exertion infection disease, SEID.
Okay, the exertion, that's the part that's kind of interesting, because it is really true. It, like I said, your body just says, hey, I can't, move anymore. And I don't remember all the other symptoms, but I just remember that being just exhausted was the number one. Now, you have done also a lot of science with the Trivedi Effect, in proving that this life force energy or biofield energy exists. Can you tell me a little bit more about the science that you participated in?
Yes, I've participated in a number of science experiments due to the generosity of Mahendra Trivedi, who really was the one who discovered this amazing life force, which comes directly from the limitless intelligence of the universe. And it is a unique kind of energy that he is able to harness. And that energy can go right to the cellular level. I participated with groups of colleagues in doing science. And I've also done a number of individual science tests on my own, with vitamin D3, with skincare, and more recently with a cluster of organs such as the heart and the liver and the lungs and the kidneys and so on. I haven't gotten the results of the most recent one yet, but the results from the prior 2 have been very, very positive, and shows that indeed those of us who have been given this life force, who have it, can indeed do, to some extent, as Mr. Trivedi does, get to the cellular level and help people. In my own work, my own alternative modality work, I have always, what I am doing now is connecting deeply with the energy of the Trivedi Effect, with this life force energy. And I do my regular healing, shall we say, and then, but through the connection I have with this life force, I channel that to the individual that I am working with. And that just really, really helps the individual. I've seen a person that I've worked with now for 1.5 years literally turn her life around. And she has told me recently that she had worked with a number of modalities as well as with doctors previously, and she had never found any relief in the way that she finds it now. She said she's never been happier, she's never been more fulfilled. And a lot of it had to do with grief, and in her case, a lack of sleep, a lot of anxiety. And the mistake is that so many of us, so many people, for example, so many people who come to me or come to doctors with chronic fatigue syndrome, or come to practitioners of alternative modalities, they will talk about symptoms because they don't know the cause. And the doctors didn't know the cause. And many times, symptom and cause have been confused. So the symptoms, which are the anxiety disorders, lack of sleep, pain, perhaps over-reliance on muscle relaxants, drugs of some kind, or I've seen people really work out to the point of where they exhaust themselves, thinking that that's going to get rid of it. And no, that just makes them more sick. And then there are others who don't do any exercise at all, and that makes them more sick. And so doctors, in looking at all of this, have said, rest a little bit, work a little bit, go back and forth. But a lot of people like yourself who are working for a living can't afford to do that. They have to get up every day and go to work. And as a result, though, what has happened is that they're not able to work as well as they'd like. Their concentration really, really suffers. So what is helpful here is to remember, and I'd like everybody to know this, when you have those symptoms, a whole lot of those symptoms, know that they're simply symptoms. They are not the cause of what you are experiencing, the pain of what people are experiencing. That there is a cause now, and it is biological in nature. And those of us who are gifted with the life force energy and can help people, we can get to the cause of the problem, not just of chronic fatigue, but of many other disorders in the body. We can, or in the spirit, or in the mind, we can get to the cause and really eradicate the root of the problem, whatever it might be. And I think it is very, very hopeful and helpful to know, and I'd like people who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome, or SAID, as we're calling it now, to know that there is hope, and that if they, for example, avail of this life force from the Trivedi Effect, which I've had direct experience with, I've been getting it myself for the last 7.5 years, and in the last 2 or 3 years have been able to do science experiments to show that I too can make a difference at the cellular level in people who are suffering from problems such as chronic fatigue. There is that wonderful hope now. And as I mentioned previously, I would urge people to get as much of this life force as possible. Try it out. Maybe the first transmission that you get will not clear things up. Maybe it will. Some people have had that experience. But keep getting it. And the more you get of it, the stronger you're going to become. I know for myself, at one point, 7.5 years ago, I had retired from university teaching, and I was feeling totally, totally burned out. I just didn't have the strength or the energy to do anything, to continue on. People at the university wanted me to continue. Oh, please continue for 1 more year. If you continue for 1 more year, you could do this, that, or the other. And much as I would have liked to have done that, I knew I just did not have the energy to do it. And so when I retired, I was poking around to try to find an answer to my fatigue. And I very fortunately came across MEAGHER Trivedi's work, his science work. And it was his science work that convinced me, because I had tried many, many modalities. And I had thought maybe this is simply another modality. But when I investigated the science that he had done, it was right there in front of me. The proof was there in front of me that this life force makes a difference, and it has been proven by science. It has been validated. So I started getting it. I signed up right away for his programs. I started getting it, and I began to notice after a while that my mind was clearer, that I had greater mental clarity. And I thought I previously had mental clarity, but this was even greater, that I had more energy, that I felt better, that I cared about doing things. I wanted to get out and get more involved with life. I was feeling better and better and better until now, when I am blessed with the gift and with the grace to be able to help other people who are in a similar condition or who are in a similar condition, a condition like the one I was in a few years ago, and like the condition you were in, Tammy, back in 2000. So I can't say enough about this life force energy that really gets to the cellular level, right into the atom, and can correct what has happened. Because what doctors are finding out with chronic fatigue syndrome is that it comes from an infection that may have been caused by stress or some kind of trauma, and that infection gets involved with the immune system, hurts the immune system, and that in turn causes a brain dysfunction. And as a result of all that, we have these multiple symptoms. So treating just the symptoms will not take care of the disease. One has to get to the root of the disease. And so far, only the life force energy can do that. Doctors, Western medicine are trying to get to the root of the disease within the Western medical framework. They haven't as yet. They're doing their best, and it's great that they're turning their attention to that. But the life force energy seems to short circuit all the work of getting to the root. And it goes right to the root and is able to rearrange things in the root of the atom within individuals, restore to them the well-being, their natural well-being, the well-being that nature intended, so that they can get their health back, get their energy back, get their interest in life back, begin to realize their goals for themselves in living a productive, healthy life. And the most important thing, I think, it begins to restore their joy in life. What's life about if it's not for enjoying it to the full, so that they can do best what they were born to do. They can really realize their gifts, their potential, and so on. So the life force energy, as you can tell, I can't say enough about it.
I hear you. It is phenomenal, just listening to you speak about it with such heart and passion, and how not only, has it helped you, but as you said, it has helped many people over time. Now, you also work with people. How can people find out more and get more information?
Well, they can check my website, www.eileenmaher.com. EILEEN Maher, one word, EILEEN, M as in mother, EAGHER.com, or they can email me at EILEEN@eileenmaher.com. And once they get on my website, they can scroll down and see a phone number that they can reach me at. So I am so eager to help people and so happy to help them recover the joy in life, because that's so important. Life is not worth it if it's not full of joy, if it's not full of productive joy, a kind of joy that brings happiness to everyone around, to one's family, to one's community, and to the world, in fact. So, yeah, people can get in touch with me by going to my website. The website is not totally finished yet, but they will see a number on there that they can call me using that particular number, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions and to help them get started, and indeed to give them a dash of the life force energy.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, EILEEN, thank you so much, and thanks for educating us all about chronic fatigue today. I learned a lot, and I love the update that you gave us. I really appreciate that. So I'll invite you back another time, and we'll talk about another topic. And again, thank you so much for sharing and letting us know more about the Trivedi Effect and how we can get in contact with you. And I'll make sure to put your website in the show notes, EILEENMAGHER.com, where everyone can go and check out the science and find out more about the different programs and find out more about EILEEN and the Trivedi Effect. So I really appreciate that, EILEEN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you for having me.
This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. To get more solid health and wellness information, visit OptimalHealthRadio.com.